Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Abundant Wellness Podcast. We have one of my favorite people to have on. I love getting to have Erin Kerry on for just a good conversation. We're going to be talking all about perimenopause and neurodivergence and how to navigate that. Just, taking a little bit of our practitioner brains, but mostly just our personal lived experiences and talking about that with you guys today, how to just navigate the challenges, the blessings in it. So Erin, thank you so much for being here. Would you share with people a little bit about your amazingness and how they can find you?
I am a health coach, functional medicine trained health coach, integrative health coach, whatever you want to call it. Sometimes I say functional nutritionist. But yes, I work with people primarily through a counseling center in East Texas. And so I'm very much focused on mental health and how to support that through root cause puzzle piecing, I would say. Root cause puzzle piecing is the way to say it. I have a podcast called Sparking Wholeness that has been going on since 2019, which is kind of crazy. That's a really long time, it feels like now. But
It's
also, I'm the
awesome.
author of a book called Live Beyond Your Label. And then my next book that is coming out in January is called Kitchen Therapy. And I haven't even, and maybe by the time this podcast airs, I will have announced it publicly, but I haven't yet. I've just kind of been waiting for
I was going to
the
say, this
fall.
is
I know.
amazing.
I know I haven't really talked about it, but it is all about mental health nutrition. And so those are kind of some of the things that I do. I've recently have been working on some courses on my website, erinbcarey.com. And so, yeah, so I'm just all in the world of mental health and wellness and nutrition and all those fun things.
I love it because that's how I found you was through your podcast, and I was like, oh my gosh, I need to be friends with this person. Like she's incredible. Her book is amazing. If you don't have it, I've given it to several of my own clients that are struggling with mental health issues of various capacities, and it's just an incredible, well written, really well researched book, but very personal too. So like you were really able to bring in both of the worlds that you love, which is like all
Mhm.
of yourself and all of the nerding out research. So like
Yep.
the science part of my brain that
Yeah,
like needs that itch scratched, like you
totally.
totally did that. So for those of you listening, make sure to go grab a copy of her book as well. But I want to talk about just on a personal level because we
Yeah.
both experienced this to varying degrees, perimenopause and the roller coaster that is. Um, let's talk about first why it feels like an undoing, because I
Yeah.
think for me now looking back, I'm like, oh, I was experiencing signs of perimenopause actually pretty early, like
Mhm.
36, 37. And I didn't realize that. And part of that was because I had a special needs kid. We were very much
Mm.
overwhelmed in the trenches of dealing with all of that stuff. So I'm just like, oh, it's just stress, right? That
Mm.
I'm experiencing kind of weird periods, whatever. Now looking back, I'm like, no, no, no. Like that, I like for sure should have been on progesterone so much sooner. So I'll share my own experience, but I actually want to hear from you. What about perimenopause felt like an undoing
Oh
for
gosh.
you?
I mean, for me, and this might not be as a typical of an experience as other women have had, but I kind of think that it is, and I'll try and think of how to share this. You can edit out whatever my rambling, wherever my rambling is taking me, but I I do think for me there is a sense of unexpected changes and uncertainty and feeling out of control and a powerlessness and a helplessness about perimenopause that triggered what happened to me early on with my own mental health. So, or
Mm,
triggered memories of that. And
yeah.
I didn't even share this at the intro, but I was diagnosed with three different mental illnesses, I guess you could say mental health issues by the time I was 18. So, first I was diagnosed with PTSD, then depression, then bipolar disorder. And I lived with a brain that I felt like was broken and out of control. And of course, at that point, it was like, yeah, you just have a chemical imbalance, which we know now is not true. And I've been free for a really long time, for a significant amount of my life now, probably over 15 years. My husband would say he's a good judge of that. We've been married for 17, so maybe
Yeah.
even as long as we've been married. But I say all that because my cycle was always pretty predictable, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't one of those people that had a lot of quote issues. Now I was back and forth on the birth control pill, and we could talk about how that impacted my mental health, which was never good. That was never a
Same.
good thing for me. But I kind of went back and forth on that. And But for the most part, my cycle was predictable and I knew what to expect. What happened in my late 30s, and I will even say I had my third baby at 35. And I don't know if I had a regular cycle after I had him.
Mm,
So what happened there
yeah.
from 35 on is, recovering in that postpartum period and breastfeeding and recovering my body and all of that. And then boom, my cycle started changing. I started
Yeah.
experiencing some weird things, and the unpredictability was triggering for me. So that's what I was trying to say from the beginning. It was just this unpredictability, this powerlessness, this helplessness that here's something that I always expected, that I knew what it
Yep.
would feel like. I knew like pretty much 26 days on the dot was my cycle previously.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden I went to 18-day cycles where I was having a
Wow.
period every 2 weeks and bleeding out profusely and
Yeah.
clots. And I can get as nasty specific as you want me to get, but it was not good. And I mean, even some painful sex was happening where I ended up going into my OBGYN at the time. This was my late 30s after my child. And I was like, what is going on? And she did a scan and she's like, everything looks fine. You could have 10 more children
Mm,
at this point. And I'm like, all right, but also what's going on? And never
right.
once did that get brought up until I had to discover it myself years later. Anyway, so that's like the long extended version. Edit what you want. But it's like
No,
it's
I
just
think this is
unpredictability.
great.
The unwinding is the unpredictability to me. That's what's been so frustrating
Absolutely.
to me.
The unpredictability. And for most of us, for me, it was the loss of stress resilience. Like,
Yep.
I felt like, oh, I had like this ability, this capacity to push through crazy things,
Yep.
right? And part of that was from having a diagnosis of complex PTSD. Like, what choice do you
Mhm.
have but to push through
Right.
really hard things, right? But there was this, like, the threshold was so much lower, and I started to feel that, like, what's wrong with me? Because
Mhm.
similar, I had been on birth control. I'd had a diagnosis of OCD in my teens, anxiety, which was really more a manifestation of anxiety and trauma, but still kind of this conglomeration of multiple things, that I had been symptom free for almost 20 years. Like, really doing well. And so you think, like, oh, I've recovered, I'm doing awesome, and then you lose this hormonal buffer in
Mhm.
your system that we don't realize. Like, I think we're just starting to scratch the surface in
Mhm.
how much we understand of how hormones protect our mental health,
Mhm.
and how they provide this amazing, like, cushion for all of our systems. And so when you start to lose that piece by piece, it feels like, I think, especially, I would bet money, but maybe I need to hear from more people on this too. But I would bet money that, especially if you have trauma in your background, that loss of sense of control over your own body feels very disorienting and
Yep.
scary. And I because we were friends at the time, I don't think I could have put that into words 3 years ago,
Mhm.
that
I
that's what
know.
I was
Same.
experiencing. But looking
Yeah.
back, I'm like, oh, that's what that was.
Yep.
That's why I felt such this, like, unrest, this
Mhm.
upheaval, or an undoing, was because not only am I like experiencing these changes in my body with weird cycles and heavy periods and, like, irregular periods, and just everything's like, my mood is weird like a couple days before, and I don't normally experience that. But really, for me, it came down to that, like, oh, something that I really felt like I needed to have a sense of control over, which was my physical health, right?
Mhm.
Now I feel like isn't there. So how do we now navigate this,
Yeah.
understanding, like, the complex interplay? I don't know if you can relate to that at all.
Oh my gosh. I mean, that cycle unpredictability for me was step one. Step two was the trauma that showed up that I didn't
Yes.
know was there, right? And like you said, the
Yep.
lack of being able to push through things and stuff things down that I used to be able to stuff down, I wasn't able to do that anymore.
Yep.
And one thing that we do
Exactly
know,
the
and
same.
I mentioned earlier that chemical imbalance theory is not like what we're going off of anymore when it comes to
Right.
mental health. However, we do know that estrogen, dopamine, GABA, all of those neurochemicals do play a role and how, quote, safe we feel at
Right.
the mind, body, spirit level. And
Right.
when estrogen is declining or fluctuating like crazy, or like me, you've seen my Dutch test, you just got estrogen everywhere, that
Right.
impacts serotonin. When
Yes.
progesterone leaves the chat, that impacts GABA. Oh, estrogen fluctuations also impact dopamine. So you take somebody, and I
Right.
would say even we've gone over my Dutch test before because I was like, oh my gosh, Andrea, this is like, I can read Dutch, I can't read my own. Like, I need help.
It's so hard to do your
It's
own.
so
Yeah.
hard when it's your own.
Yeah.
But I will say what was so helpful for me to see was the things that keep my body safe were not in a, like, I keep using safety in this like air quote way, but like safety is so important for a female. Like just that felt sense of safety, neuroception,
Absolutely.
knowing that you're gonna be okay. When the hormones are shifting, you don't feel like you're gonna be okay anymore. And so for me, I had estrogen everywhere and I
Hmm.
wasn't detoxifying it well or metabolizing it. And thanks,
Right.
mom. I don't know, mom, grandma, who, whatever family dynamic is affected there.
Right.
I also had very low levels of the progesterone metabolite. Oh, which one is it that helps with sleep and anxiety in the middle of the night? Whichever one
Yeah.
that is, I was at postmenopausal level for that. So
Right.
here I have this extreme imbalance because
Right.
progesterone's like, see ya. Estrogen's like, hey, still here, still got a lot over here.
But I'm going to show up only when I want to and not when it's helpful
Exactly.
for you. Yeah.
Exactly. And then testosterone was still, actually, I was kind of impressed with my testosterone. I was like, all right, I still got that. Maybe that'll help my
Yeah.
brain a little bit for now.
Right.
But then my dopamine levels, my dopamine
Yeah.
metabolites were very low. And so I was like,
Right.
so this is why I feel
This is the
like
missing piece.
weird anxiety out of nowhere. This is probably,
Hmm.
I've probably always been ADHD, and now I feel extra ADHD. And it's
Right.
like, this is not just in my mind. And this is what I want women to understand. This isn't a brain thing. This is a whole body thing that's happening, that's
Right.
changing. And I felt it. And I think women, we intuitively can feel it, right? Like I knew, I was like, this
Absolutely.
anxiety is not me. I am not an anxious person. Like I'm just not, I mean, I'm an overthinker. I have fear. I'm controlling, right? Like maybe I have some of these survival mechanisms,
Right. But it doesn't maybe rule
but
your every single day.
I just had some weird intrusive thoughts. Like we've talked about that, like that tryptophan really helped out a lot with, and
Yes.
that we have some little tools that we've used, both of us. But it was just like, what is this? And a lot of it was right there before I started my period when estrogen was through the roof and my progesterone was
Yes.
like, nope, see ya. So,
Yeah. Not here to help you out. There's
yeah.
nothing to buffer you anymore.
Uh-huh.
Exactly. Yes. And I think recognizing that it is a whole body experience, I felt like I was losing my mind for a
Yeah.
period of time there. And we've done another episode on this, so if you want to go back, and we have it on both of our podcasts where we talked about PTSD and like
Mhm.
our, because we were kind of both like, you were just coming out of the awful
Yeah.
year and I was just
Yeah.
walking into, I
Mhm.
didn't know it at the time, but I was just walking into
Yeah.
a year of just really horrible, like, resurgence of PTSD that I had
Mhm.
not dealt with. And so this
Mhm.
is where there is the blessing in the curse. Like, I couldn't see it at the time because it felt so awful, and because I didn't fully understand what I was experiencing. Like, why am I experiencing this now? I thought I've dealt with everything. I've been in therapy before. Like, I'm very diligent about taking care of my inner world, right?
Mhm.
And so I just didn't understand, like, how hormones could play such a huge role in that.
Totally.
But the blessing in that was that because that stuff was coming up and I could not pretend that it wasn't there anymore because I didn't have the hormones masking for me, I really do feel like, for me personally, it allowed me to get to some really deep, like really early,
Yeah.
like levels of healing that I don't know that I would have been able to access any other way. And so thankfully I was able to do that. And so we can look at this as like, I'm not falling apart. I'm kind of like just allowing things to come up that need to come up,
Mhm.
probably. And the support's going to have to be different now because I'm in my early 40s. I'm not 25, right? And so what does that support look like? And it, for me, has felt like needing to be so much more diligent. I feel I don't know if we've joked about this, but you've probably seen the meme or the reel that's like, I feel like my own Tamagotchi, where it's like, you didn't get enough water today, you're gonna die tomorrow. You know,
Mhm.
like that. It's that sensitive, right? Where it feels like I do just have to be that much more careful about taking care of myself in ways that in my 20s I didn't have to. I could eat Taco Bell and I could have gluten and I could, go 5 nights of the week going to bed at midnight and it didn't impact me. And now it's not, none of that works,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So there is the blessing in, again, hindsight. I would not have said this going through it because the whole thing sucked. Like,
Mm-hmm.
all of it was terrible. PTSD is awful, and I'm not minimizing that. But now I can look back and say I am thankful that I was able to get to some places that were impacting me emotionally that I couldn't access before because the hormonal piece
Yeah.
was kind of providing some protection. I don't know if you've experienced
Yeah, no,
similar.
I feel the same way. I heard somebody, gosh, I want to quote him correctly, and I don't remember who it was that said this, but I heard this phase of life, this perimenopause phase, being described as the chaos before the calm. And I
Mm,
love that description because, we always think
yeah,
of the calm before the storm, or maybe it's the storm before the calm, right? Like just
yeah,
flipping that because that is how it feels. But I do think that there's purpose in this. I think there's purpose in the way that the brain is being rewired. And I think
right.
that even like I've kind of dug into more like some of the biblical dynamics of the women who
Mm,
served in scripture who were
yeah,
old ladies like Deborah, like
yeah,
she wasn't young, right?
no,
Or is it Anna, who's the old lady that prophesied about Jesus? She had been a widow for
right,
a time. She's an old lady. I'm trying to think of who, I mean, like Naomi, she was past childbearing years. Like
right.
there is a purpose for women past childbearing years. And I think a lot of that goes to the fact that our brains will be more aligned after this when our
Mm-hmm.
hormones kind of stabilize. And whether you do HRT or not HRT, you're still going to have just a steady drip of something going
Yeah.
forward. You're gonna, or kind of be in a flatlined state, not a cycling way. And so I think that there is some grieving to be had for that. Like one thing I'm processing right now is when I'm at the end of my period, I love knowing that I'm about to feel so good, right?
Yes.
Like I love how I feel in my follicular and ovulatory phase. I have more
Yep.
energy. I'm nicer to everybody, including my husband.
The
My
dopamine
libido
is
is up.
flowing.
Yes.
It
I mean,
is on
everything.
point.
I
Yes.
just feel so good. I'm nicer to my kids. I mean, this sounds
Right.
terrible, and I'm not saying it like it's an excuse, but it is something like I don't have to think about it. Like I just
Right.
feel good. And then as soon as it, like right now, I think I'm on day 19 or 20 right now, and I'm feeling it, right? And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I have to think about being nicer to everybody. Like I actually
Yes, you
have
have to
to
work at
activate that
this.
prefrontal
Right.
cortex and
Right.
be a little bit more patient. And my fruit of the spirit are going to have to be flowing today. Whereas before, it's like,
Right.
oh, it's good. My hormones are good. I mean, and it's so hard, I think, for a lot of men to understand this, for husbands to understand this. And that's another element to this that I thought,
Mm-hmm.
um, or thinking, and I'm married to a therapist. Okay. So like, let's just say that like he knows the things about marriage and communication, but I think our communication has changed because I've been
Yes.
so sensitive and touchy the last few years.
I'm
And
glad
it's
it's not
like,
just me.
yeah, it's like poor guy, like who is he married to? Like there's certain, we'll get
Yeah.
into little fights about things that I'm like, I don't feel like you're hearing me or understanding me. And now all of a sudden it's like I'm in my child self feeling misunderstood and unheard, and I'm not
Right.
feeling adult me. Whereas before I
Right.
could push through and the little things didn't bother me. Now the little things bother me. So it's like I said, this is the chaos before the calm. There are just like so many weird little things that are tweaking and changing that I
Mm-hmm.
know is for a purpose and it's all going to be worked out. And I really hope, like marriage wise, family wise, in every area of my life, when things slow down
Yeah.
hormonally, I'm going to be more, yeah, I'm going to be more ready to step into my God given purpose in a
I
fresh
love that.
way with a new perspective. But man, it's a ride to get
It's
there.
a right in the middle. I love that. I love that perspective, though. I haven't actually thought about it that way. And I think that it's a really healthy way to look at it because if you think about, I mean, the level of hormone like surges that we have are very similar to what we experience in pregnancy, right?
Mhm.
And postpartum, like just the rapid shifting that happens. And I'm thinking about like how our communication changed when I was pregnant and the
Mhm.
sensitivity that I had
Totally.
to different things. It does bond you in a different way to your partner. But I've even like, my husband and I have talked about this where he's openly shared, like, he's like, I'm grieving certain parts of
Mhm.
you because I like part of me doesn't know, like, is that just over? Like that part of our relationship that I felt was so stable. And now, just to give you context, like, we're not unstable. We just have little like moments of disconnection that I didn't experience before for the same reasons, like the same examples you're giving, where it's just a little more touchy or a little bit more sensitive. And he's like, just not used to that. So, same thing where, we're having to have a lot more conversations about this because there is a shift, and it's very similar to how I felt in pregnancy and postpartum, where
Mhm.
it's like we had a rule: we will not judge each other for the things that are said at 3 a.m. when we're feeding and changing a baby, because
That's
nobody's happy, nobody's in their right mind, everybody's crabby and exhausted. Like, that is off the table, right?
Mhm.
So I do think that my hope and my goal in having a lot of these conversations with him is that when we do get to the other side of whatever this crazy stage is,
Mhm.
more stability, right? Deeper connection, even though it feels like a little bit rough waters at times. So, on that note, this is kind of a weird question, maybe. It won't be weird to you, I don't think, but maybe to the listeners. Just like hang with us for a second while we get the words right. What parts of you have come out in perimenopause that you actually really like,
Mhm.
that maybe were harder to access before? Because I can name them for myself, but I'm curious, like, maybe I'll start with an example
Yeah.
of that. I am way more assertive now than I ever was
Yep.
before.
Mhm.
I find that I genuinely don't care what people think about me anymore.
Mhm.
Like, I care. I do care. There's a part of me that does care, but like there's also just like, whatever. Like, I'm not bothered by those things, and I'm also like just less trepidatious about offending people by being truthful.
Yep.
Um and I'm never mean about it. Like, I'm not mean, abrasive, like, in your face, but I'm a lot more able to be in my own. Does that make sense? Of like,
Absolutely.
this is what I like, this is what I need, and I'm not apologizing for it anymore. I have spent 40 years trying to get to that part of me, right? So I'm curious if there's anything like that for you that you're recognizing is like, man, I
Yeah.
actually
I mean,
really like
it's
this.
really similar. I mean, it just I say no to things I want to say no to, right? Like I
And I
stop
don't
saying
explain
yes
anymore
to,
either.
yeah.
I can't do that. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
and there's
Yeah.
things I just know my energy, where my energy is and where it's not. And there are things that I'm like, yeah, I don't want to do that. I just want to sit at home. Or right, like, or there's things even that I do want to do, that I'm like, I'm gonna say yes to that because I want to say yes to that. I'm not gonna feel guilty about the other option that I'm leaving
Right.
behind. A lot of it revolving around family dynamics. And I mean, there's just so much I feel that over my life as a pleaser, right? Probably some fawn mentality there. Like
Yeah,
when we're talking about
for
fight,
sure.
fight, fawn, freeze, or fight, fight, freeze, fawn, I can be a fawner, and I
For
don't
sure. Same.
fawn as much, or I catch myself in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like I know, okay, am I saying this just because I'm trying to be nice, or do I really mean this? And so it's
Right.
interesting. I think like in the assertiveness you're talking about, I've been calling. We had some issues with a pest control company, and I've been, yeah, straight up and confronting them, and like things that I probably didn't do before, that now I'm like, I'm a grown woman, I can do this.
Yeah. Right.
And I just am not overthinking certain things the
Yeah.
way I used to, which is so funny because on the flip side there are, I mean, some of those symptoms that pop up, there is some overthinking and there is some anxiety at 3 a.m.
Yes.
and things like that that are weird, but like in the day to day dealing with stuff, I do feel that I'm more me than I ever have been. There's
Yes.
just some waves that come along with it too.
Right. Exactly. And with that, there's a beauty in that, and there's a grace, and it's one of those things that I remember even like in my teens or my early 20s, like looking around at older women at church, that I would be like kind of shocked at what they would say. It was never offensive, but just like, "Oh my gosh, like you can
Yep.
be honest like that? Like, this is
Mhm.
like new information to me, you know?"
Mhm.
And so, but then there was also a part of me that's like, I want to be like that someday.
Mhm.
Like, where
Totally.
there's like just a no apology, no excuses for being who you are, right? And I'm not saying we're allowing like, I'm not talking about bad behaviors. I'm talking about just owning who you are, right? Um, but then within that, I also think there's a little waves of maybe grief too, or just like, oh, I kind of miss the buffer I used to have around that. I don't miss the overthinking that I used to have
Mhm.
around people pleasing. I don't miss the anxiety that I had around people pleasing. But sometimes I wish I think sometimes maybe there's a little bit of a sprinkle of grief in there too, of like, that would be useful for me right now
Mhm.
at this moment to have a little bit more access to that, right? Um, and I think it is a beautiful opportunity to do some of that inner work that
Yep.
we don't have the time for in our 20s when we're raising young children, early 30s, where we don't have, there isn't that forced necessity almost because you do have all those wonderful hormones buffering your system. And so there isn't that, like, sometimes we have to feel bad enough, right, to
Yeah.
take action on different things. So, talking about that, what are some things that have helped kind of on the hormone side of things balance things out for you? Because I know
Well,
that's going to be the question people ask.
there's so much. I do think trying finally caving and getting on some micronized progesterone for my sleep. Now it doesn't, I will say it's interesting. I still don't always sleep through the night. I still will wake up, but I was consistently waking up and staying awake for hours at a time for a
That's
good
miserable.
2 to 3 years. And I never was like that. I was always the person who could sleep through the night, could sleep through
Mm-hmm.
anything. I've always been a good sleeper. And that was, aside from my cycle changing, that was one of the first things to go. And I had no idea that that was a perimenopause thing, had no idea that that was a progesterone drop. But I do
Yeah.
know that my progesterone started dropping in fall of 2022. That's when I first saw, I
Mm-hmm.
took a test. It was like, okay, but I waited probably, it was a good 2 more years before I actually tried progesterone. However, I will say this, it did cause me to gain some weight at first, and that was really
Yeah.
frustrating. So then I just went
That
off.
water retention.
I was like,
Yeah.
I would rather, and this was, I was on probably for a good 9 months and still
Wow.
gained weight. And I was like, I'm done. I'm not doing it. So that was something that I stopped for a while because I was so frustrated. But then I also realized because my body is changing so much, was my eating and my working out. I'm one of
Had
those
to
people
change.
that had to change. I'm kind of an undereater. Like if I'm
Same.
focused, if I'm doing something, I don't eat enough. And so I really had to buckle down on because I love working out. The exercise has always been important for me. But I think I was under eating for the amount of exercise I was doing, and especially like building muscle and things like that. I needed more
Yeah.
complex carbs in this phase. So that's something else I've done is I've added in. I went from many years of lower carb, higher fat protein to adding in more complex carbs, more of the, all of the fiber. I'm really tracking my fiber pretty consistently. That's
Awesome.
made a big difference too. That was something that I needed in this phase. And it took me a
Right.
while. It was some practitioner on Instagram that mentioned it, that some menopausal practitioner. I was like, oh, I probably should add carbs back in. And I was afraid to because going lower carb was so helpful for my brain mentally
Yeah.
that I was a
That's what I
little
was
bit
going to
worried.
ask you.
Yeah, and so, but it's been good. It's been a good transition. Trying out that, adding in DIM was really. I use something called Estro Cleanse by Nutritional Frontiers. It's my favorite DIM because it has
That's
turmeric.
awesome.
It has a whole lot of other anti-inflammatories. So that helped me to get back on the progesterone without having the same issues. Everything kind of balanced
Awesome.
out. So that was real. Those are kind of the main things. I think I swapped. I do a lot for sleep support. I'm always rotating different things. Sometimes cortisol manager is great. Right now, I'm trying Thorns. I can't remember what it's called. It's their new sleep thing that's L-theanine.
Okay.
L-theanine is my
Yes.
friend at night.
Amazing.
L-theanine, progesterone, magnesium glycinate. Those have been a combination that have really worked well for me
Awesome.
throughout the last couple of years. Those are kind of the main things. But the progesterone, I found out last month I had 2 periods in a month. That was cool because I had only been cycling my progesterone. I was only doing it like
Oh,
day
okay.
13 and on till I started my period. I realize now I think I need to be on progesterone the whole month. Like I think it's
Okay.
really like at the
Yeah.
point where I need to be on it. So this month I've been on it every single day, and
Wow.
and it's yeah. I mean it's but I am kind of like it's a DIY thing. I think for all of
Yeah.
us with this, like what works this month might not work next month. But I did have 2 periods last month and then 2 periods a few months back because I was cycling
Mm.
progesterone. And
Yeah.
so it's, ugh, I still, which tells me my estrogen is still pretty high.
Yeah.
For
Right.
all the work I'm doing, it's still pretty high. I was doing NAC for a while too, and acetylcysteine. I just love that for liver support. I think my liver needs it. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, anyway, so those are kind of the main things right
Those
now.
are good. Yeah, and I think you touched on a lot of really important pieces here, but the primary message I would say within that is that accepting that you're gonna have to care for yourself differently. Like
Mhm.
I went through the exact same thing where I had lost a bunch of inflammatory weight from a SIBO infection and then just completely plateaued for a good like 9 months. And I wasn't too, I don't I'm actually very comfortable in my body, but I was like, I know I'm not like at a weight that feels the best to
Yep.
me, and I'm not building muscle, and I know that that's going to be a problem. Like, I know that I need to be for bone health and all that good stuff. And I was like, I just am racking my brain, like, why, is this not happening? And finally, hired a coach for myself because I'm like, I need a me for me. Like,
Yep.
I can be that for other people. I'm like in this area, I'm just not figuring it out. And after like 2 weeks of tracking macros, I was so far under, like
Mhm.
so far under. And
Yep.
I just don't like have a great appetite. And that's probably for a couple different reasons. But so I've had to really work, and it has been like work to get
Hmm.
up. It's because I
Me
don't
too.
think about it.
Hmm.
And I get busy on work, and I am fine with just a few bites of food, and except for that I'm not really, but like mentally I think I'm doing fine. So but the message behind that is that I had to do something different than what I had done before.
Hmm.
And what worked for me in my 20s and 30s is not working for me now. Like, I have to be a lot more careful about the type of cardio that I do, because that can throw me into high cortisol and weird like blood sugar issues that are not healthy, right? And I see that with a lot of my clients too, where they're trying the strategies that work in their 30s, hoping that it'll work now. Um, and then I would just say, because I know we're wrapping up on time here, I would say for those of you that are listening, every month can be different in perimenopause. That can be really frustrating. But if you notice that your baseline has changed, like your baseline month to month, how you feel month to month, how you feel in your body, how your sleep is, your mood, your energy, if that has changed and what you're doing is not working, then make sure that you're working with somebody who can help you put those pieces
Yeah.
back together, because we all need that. I need that for myself,
Mhm.
right? I am not unbiased to my own labs. Like, that's
Mhm.
just a fact. I see them and I'm like, oh my gosh,
Mhm.
and whereas anybody else's, I can totally put the whole picture together. So there are a lot of things that can be really helpful. Like you said, GABA, L-theanine is amazing. Cortisol manager is awesome. Um, Making sure you're getting enough food and enough movement that is stabilizing, safe movement for your
Yeah.
body, not stress movement. And
Yes.
there is a difference. You do a really good job of talking about this on your Instagram. So for those of you that are listening, make sure to go follow her, because you do, just like in your day to day, you talk about like, this is why I'm doing this kind of movement, and this is how it feels to my brain, which helped me a lot too. Like, identify that there were certain things that I could push myself a little bit harder in, and the other things I couldn't at all. So, do you have any last? I feel like we could talk about this for,
Yeah.
as per usual, hours and hours. But
Right.
do you have any last parting words of encouragement for those that are listening?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, your body is going through so many changes right now. It really does need that extra TLC, and it might come in the form of what we just said is eating more food than we think we need to eat. And that is a very scary thing, but I do think that there is something to be said for in this season looking at a balanced macro style, not calories. We're not looking at calories, but making sure we're getting enough of those macronutrients, carbs, protein and fat. And it's
Yeah.
going to look different for everybody, but I do think that there's something to be said for that. Instead of just going willy nilly, I'm eating how I feel because intuitive eating and da 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 da. And like, and that, sure, that can work for a season, but like intuitive eating, I don't eat enough. I just don't.
Yeah.
And I
My
have to,
intuition on eating is not my
right.
buddy.
I
Yeah.
have to track, and that food is safety, right? Nourishment is safety. The body
So
won't feel
good.
safe to heal if it's in a fight or flight state because your blood sugar is dysregulated because you got too busy working on a project or making your kids food or whatever it is that we're doing, because we're all doing a thousand things right now. We have to have nutrients because internally we're shifting so much, our external environment is shifting so much that I do think that there is that food safety factor. I did just finish, and the reason this is fresh in my mind, a nutrition for perimenopause course. I'm really excited
Awesome.
about that. It's going to be like faith based and all of that
Oh,
because
that's so
I think
cool.
just feeling that safety and then the purpose in all of this, I think is really important.
I love that. And I would say that that's a huge, if you had two takeaways from this episode, it would be that, that the undoing is purposeful. It's not,
Hmm.
when we are living our life in relationship with God, nothing is wasted, right? And so everything gets to have a beautiful purpose, even if we're in the middle of it, which I am, you know, and there's beautiful things happening and there's hard things happening. And so, and that safety piece I think is so huge. So thank you, Erin, for having a conversation with me. It's always fun to have you on the show.
Easy and fun. Yeah, just to talk.
And yeah, we could do this anytime. That's why I pull you on here, because I'm like, I need
Right.
to talk to my friend. So for those of you that are listening, please go make sure to follow Erin on Instagram. It's at Sparking Wholeness, right? Is that
Yep.
at Sparking Wholeness? I'll put it in the show notes too.
Yep.
The website that you have, the link to your book as well. Those are all just phenomenal resources. So thank you so much for being on here today, Erin.
It was fun. Thanks for having me. This was great.